Good morning. We're now going live on the next series of our Irish Rural Link webinar programs. As you know, this morning we're talking about the bioeconomy. We're asking questions about whether it is a real potential or whether it is still developing in terms of its future. We have a really fine guest list this morning. And we're really happy to have them here this morning, so you're all welcome. And before I introduce you, I can also welcome you, members of Irish Rural Link, and a range of the public, experts, people who are studying bioeconomy this morning. You will note, if you're looking at these on a regular basis, you can ask questions. If you put your cursor at the bottom of the screen, you'll see the Q&A, and we really do want you to ask those questions because we will get to as many of them as possible in the hour that we have. So the first guest I'm going to introduce to you is Patrick Barrett, Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine. Patrick is an agricultural inspector in the Research and Codex Division of the Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine. He's a policy lead for bioeconomy policy implementation and agricultural knowledge and innovation and policy development. He's part of the Secretariat for the National Bioeconomy Implementation Group, and he leads on the development of the food and bio-based systems research and innovation. So Patrick, you're very welcome. James Gaffey from Tralee. He is project coordinator of EIP Agri Biorefinery Gloss Project. He is the principal investigator and co-director of the Circular Bioeconomy Research Group at the Institute of Technology in Tralee. And he coordinates the EIP Agri Biorefinery Gloss Project. So you're very welcome, James. Dr. Aideen O'Doherty, I hope I've got the Irish pronunciation right, O'Doherty, UCD. Aideen is a senior researcher with the Bioeconomy Centre in the UCD College of Business, currently specialising in the development of sustainable bioeconomy networks. She's a chartered accountant and has many years experience in, let's call it, the business world, and we will be coming back to you on that, Aideen. So finally, Dr. Rosanna Kleeman, postdoctoral research fellow on the ABC Economy Project. She is a research fellow on the ABC Economy Project. Rosanna has expertise in water, waste management, sustainable development, and the circular economy. She gained her engineering doctorate in sustainable recovery of phosphorus from wastewater in a project partnered by the University of Surrey and Thames Water UK. The current project is the ABC Economy, which is on www.abceconomy.ie, and it's funded by the SEAI and DAFM, and it aims to develop sustainable value chains from forestry food production. So Rosanna, you're very welcome this morning. And as I said, to those of you listening, don't be afraid to press the questions. Patrick, after all of that, can you give the poor old layperson a brief overview of bioeconomy, and then we'll get really into it?
Well, good morning, James, and good morning to all your viewers and listeners, and we're really delighted to be invited here. So I suppose the bioeconomy is a term that I suppose tries to draw together, first of all the people working in the area of biological resources, and that's people in agriculture, in food and forestry, in the marine, and also linking through to the waste system that deals with the biological resources. And what it's trying to do is introduce new technologies, address sustainability, as we know as a key issue, climate action and environment, and value added opportunities for products that provide social sustainability and economic sustainability. So it's trying to link together our primary producers, our industries, to the opportunities related to new products, and they are something that goes beyond food and feed, but nonetheless is linked to the food and feed production, and then trying to develop the markets for these products so that we link up the whole value chain, and ultimately in the end we're trying to address big challenges around climate action and environment and economic and social sustainability. That's my opening gambit, James.
That's good, and that's a good start because, as I said, this is a very exciting piece of work that all of you are involved in. It's really exciting, and you know, it does fit in with the objectives of climate change, and God knows we have to do something about that. But it's also exciting in that it's opening up a whole range of projects, etc. Rosanna, can you tell me about the ABC Economy project? It's very interesting from what I read.
So the ABC Economy project is focused on just Monaghan and Tipperary county councils, and we're helping farmers, food producers and foresters make value from whatever waste they have. So initially we had some workshops with our stakeholders in the two counties to find out what is their actual main problem areas, and then we went forward from that then and said, well, now we're looking at different technologies that they can use to make value from these wastes. So the idea is that maybe you could, so for instance, like manure is obviously a big problem for most people, but then we'd be looking at maybe you could make a phosphorus fertilizer from the manure, and then whatever's left over, you could burn that, make some energy, and then again, whatever's left over from that, you can make some more value from. So we'd be looking at, it's called a cascading system, where you sort of have a higher value, then see what you can do with it next, and then see if there's anything else you can do with it afterwards again.
That's very interesting. James, you're doing the biorefinery gloss. Tell us more about that, because again, it's an interesting project.
Thanks, Seamus. So Biorefinery Glass is a EIP Agri-funded project, so it's co-funded by the Department of Agriculture and the European Commission. It's a small-scale biorefinery demonstration project. So a biorefinery is essentially a factory which processes biomass into a lot of different products and maybe some energy with the residual stream using the cascading approach that Rosanna has mentioned. So in Biorefinery Glass, we work directly with farmers. So we're using a mobile system, a mobile biorefinery system, which we've demonstrated on farms with Carberry farmers in West Cork. And we take fresh grass and we process fresh grass into a number of different products. So we separate some of the protein in grass into a fiber fraction, which is fed back to the cow. We see, even though it's lower in overall protein than, say, silage, because we press some of the protein out, we're still seeing a higher nitrogen to milk conversion efficiency. So this feed compares really, really well with silage, and we're doing some trials with UCD Lions Farm. We're having some really good results there. It's also resulting in lower overall emissions when you feed this, what we call press cake fiber, to the cow. From the residual stream, then we can extract the remaining protein, we can dry it, and we're trialing that as a feed for chickens and pigs. Some of it can potentially be upgraded for human protein to use as a plant protein in human diets. And then from the residual stream that's left, again, we can extract more high value products, prebiotics, and we can use the residue that's left to produce biogas through anaerobic digestion. At the moment, anaerobic digestion is being promoted as an alternative for grassland use, for example, for beef farmers, but we're using this cascading approach in the bioeconomy to extract protein and other materials before we get to that stage, so that we can add more value to it and potentially create a system which isn't dependent on subsidies and can stand on its own feet.
And James, if I may just follow up, I mean, I'm thinking of farmers who are listening into this morning, and they're especially the beef farmers who are struggling enormously. Have you got to the point where you can calculate or assess the value in terms of financial value to a farmer if this worked, or are you still developing this?
Well, we know that if we put in all the different processes to extract value, we could increase the value of grass by about 10-fold. So we could significantly increase, but we have to find that medium between investment in the process and revenue potential. And that's something we're doing at the moment. We're doing a business case analysis through this to look at what is the financially viable model. We're hoping to keep it as small scale as possible so that farmers at a relatively low cost could come together and take up one of these machines or facilities, depending on the scale. So it's something we'll probably have a good idea about within the next few months, but it's something we're working towards at the moment.
Okay, I'll come back on that question into Patrick as well. Aideen, you're working in UCD, and we know that without the backing of the universities generally, and we know UCD have a major role in this business. Could you just explain where you are in your work, and indeed UCD generally in the bioeconomy?
Yeah, so good morning, everyone, and thank you to Irish Rural Link for organising and for the invite. My name is Aideen O'Doherty. I am a postdoc research fellow in the Bioeconomy Centre in UCD, and also I'm part of the UCD School of Business. So what myself and my colleagues do in the School of Business, we are part of the sustainability platform of the Bioorbic Centre. So our job is to figure out how we can develop the bioeconomy in a way that both gives opportunities to communities, to people, so economic opportunities, employment opportunities, particularly in places that may not have had these opportunities before, and also that development is done in an environmentally sustainable way, so that the bioeconomy is, it's largely circular, so we largely use waste as feedstock, and that we take an approach to land use where we're taking into account the full value of nature. So it's about sort of not repeating the mistakes of the past in terms of the extractive economy. We don't want to do what we did with the peat. We want to sort of use this value cascade approach that Rosanna and James were talking about, and make sure that we're not just extracting and burning, that we're creating value for everyone in an environmentally sustainable way. And in particular, the College of Business and my work, we're looking at developing networks. So what kind of networks do we need to support the bioeconomy? How can we get everyone involved who needs to be involved? Communities, farmers, policymakers, NGOs, businesses, at all different sizes of businesses, and how everyone can work together most effectively to develop the sector.
And Aideen, coming from the business side of things, because I think it's really important that the research and the development that James and everybody else is involved in is paralleled by the business opportunities. Have we a bit to go on that, or are you making good strides in translating these projects into proper business return?
Yeah, so I think we've started on that journey. We're not as far ahead as some other countries are, but what we're doing is figuring out what are the supports that need to be put in place so that we can emulate countries, say like Italy, who'd be very far ahead in this. So that's what it's all about, creating the networks to kind of link people up. So like there's huge opportunities so we've got a lot of big businesses involved in the Bioorbic Centre. Like Glambia, they have the Agrichem Way project, commercial mushroom producers. So there's lots of big businesses working on this. But further down the line, there are loads of opportunities for entrepreneurs, for SMEs, and for creating new products. So really innovative products, like you can make shoes from sheep's wool. You can use hemp in a million different ways. It's about sort of looking at the new materials we can use, the new processes, the new products that can be created, and making sure this is done in a socially inclusive way, economically beneficial way, and environmentally sustainable as well.
Thank you, Patrick. In terms of agriculture, and we know that the Common Agriculture Policy, the next one, will be very centered in terms of bioeconomy, EIP Agri, and all connected with that. How far would you say we as a country, in terms of agriculture and thinking bioeconomy, have come over the last few years, and where do you think we should be now prioritizing ourselves?
Sure, Seamus. So I suppose just to take your question and maybe just identify a few key steps that has happened in Europe initially. The European Commission has produced a bioeconomy strategy, which came out in 2012. And this really started EU member states in starting to strategically look at the bioeconomy. And initially, it has started out as a knowledge and innovation activity. And you can see that with the activities of Aideen, Rosanna and James, where they are beginning to come from the academic system and engage with industry and engage with primary producers and engage with county councils and with regional authorities and say, well, what resources are in our system, for example, in Ireland? So we know, for example, there was a piece in the Sunday Business Post identifying the amount of wool that may be available this year, that, you know, the price has bottomed out completely, and we need to find a new use for this. So James, Rosanna and Aideen and all their colleagues, they know of technologies that can be examined in terms of this type of resource. We know in the fruit and vegetable system, out of 350,000 tons of materials that's in the system on an annual basis, that between 25 to 45% of some of this fruit and veg is going to waste. And this is, first of all, we try to avoid this waste, but if we can't avoid this waste, we can do something with this materials rather than it going to landfill. We know in terms of manures and slurries that maybe we can do something more with this. James has highlighted how we can do more with grass. So the European Union came along in 2018 and says we need to match bioeconomy to climate action and environmental action, and we need to request to member states to strategically look at this. So what Ireland has done, led by the Department of the Taoiseach and putting the two departments of Agriculture, Food and Marine and Climate Action and Environment together, is to have an implementation group that works across, I think it's 8 different departments and 11 different agencies, to look at how can we be more coherent, how can we be better networked and collaborative, not only amongst departments and agencies, but by talking to industry, by talking to primary producers, and then tackling some key issues around waste legislation and explaining further what the bioeconomy means to all our different, either our citizens or our primary producers or our different industries, and then offering funding opportunities which allows them to explore ideas in terms of, for example, we know in Limerick of a company that's working with the University of Limerick to take forestry residues and look to how they can be turned into materials used to make wind turbines. Or we can see where we have companies in Monaghan that are looking at residues of marine processing to make human and animal nutrition products. So our job as the government is to try and facilitate this activity and to make sure that we develop the bioeconomy to meet the needs of what Ireland needs to do. And those needs have been identified as jobs and competitiveness in rural regional areas, climate action and environment, and really trying to have a more sustainable economy, particularly for our primary producers. So we need to have, and this is going to be a step change. We don't just want the primary producer to be a biomass supplier. We want the primary producer to be a key part of a value chain, and that's able to benefit from any value that's generated through the production of forestry residues going to make wind turbines. We want the primary producer to be part of that value chain. So there's a lot of thinking to go, but where we are is we have a very good cross-governmental thinking. We've very good knowledge and innovation being generated. We have companies who have been in the strategic position to be able to examine the opportunity, active now. And what we want to do is we want to scale that up and expand it, and to really in this period between 2020 and 2030 to generate what's known as a circular bioeconomy. And that'll take into account agriculture, fisheries, marine and the waste system, and the better benefits for all the actors in that system.
Yeah, it really is exciting. Rosanna, there was a question there, but I think I know where it is. But anyway, the questions I'm coming to you are in terms of potential for local communities. Like your project that you described, it comes across in Tipperary. Are there other community projects that you know of, or how would you assess the value of communities being involved?
I definitely think it's important to get communities involved in these projects at the outset, because we want to make sure we're actually addressing issues that they're really having, instead of us maybe approaching them thinking that we know what their issues are. We need them to kind of meet up with us in workshops and whatnot and tell us exactly what waste issues they're having, and then what's important to them in terms of actually treating that waste. So I'm looking at technologies now. So I'd be looking at, well, are the technologies actually easy enough for everyone to be able to use? what's the footprint of the technologies? Could they be used on individual farms, or would we have to create maybe like a central hub where different farmers can bring all their waste to one spot, and how that would work? So it's definitely, you know, when we're talking about sustainability, we always consider like the social aspect is a really important part of the sustainability as well. So most people just consider the environmental part, but obviously the economics, like we need to make sure any different technologies we might introduce have a really good return on investment that James mentioned earlier on. So yeah, I definitely think that we're getting communities involved at the very start is a really key step. And there are a few good options. So Clock Jordan in Tipperary, a really good option there. So they have a lot of pyrolysis and sort of treating a lot of waste there. And then up in Monaghan, obviously, there's different mushroom producers there, and they're kind of they're really leading the way in kind of all these interesting aspects of what you can do with mushroom waste. I never had realized until I looked at their website, like the huge amount of things they can do with mushroom waste, even like creating proteins and leathers and like supplements for vegans. So it's incredible what people are doing, and we just need a little extra help maybe to get sort of smaller scale people involved in SMEs. So that's why we kind of do need the county councils then to have strategic plans around bioeconomy development to kind of help us with this, so that it's kind of communicated from the county councils downwards. So we had really, really good engagement from Monaghan because it was communicated from the county council downwards, and we had a huge amount of people at our workshop. Similar in Tipperary, that really, really helps people get involved and understand why they should care to begin with.
Thanks. And James, you know, we're Tralee IT. Are there other ITs? Who are you working with in order to bring as much clout to the projects that you're involved in? Is it a wider partnership? Has it other companies involved? Just explain that one.
Yeah, sure. So I guess our involvement in the bioeconomy goes beyond the biorefinery glass project. We're involved in a number of EU focused bioeconomy, knowledge transfer, desk study, demonstration projects in the bioeconomy. So we work with Irish partners within IT Tralee. I coordinate the Circular Bioeconomy Research Group. I co-lead that group. And we collaborate with a biotechnology centre, Shannon Applied Biotechnology, who's also based at the centre. We interact a lot with the Bioorbic Centre, where Aideen is based and Rosanna is based. So a lot of Irish interaction, but we also collaborate a lot with EU projects so that we benefit from the sharing of knowledge when these European projects take place. So in your EU projects, basically, you have to have a minimum of 3 EU partners participating on the projects, and this way there's a sharing of knowledge across member states, so that's really beneficial. We also interact a lot with industry, some who are focused in primary production, but others who are SMEs, who are innovative SMEs, who are developing technologies or products based on different resources. So we kind of span the value chain, going from the feedstock to the process to the products, and we work with all of those stakeholders. And I think that's really important, that those different stakeholders are important to make that chain go all the way from the feedstock to the market.
Aideen, I see you've captured some funny comments that come in text, at least, about making shoes from wool. Bernard Joyce is talking about a farmer getting €20. I think he's right. He said that's what he says in Lannan for 245 fleeces. That's pretty rough. So the wool, you know, in other words, current usage of products are not making money at all. Wool is probably the best example. Do you know of any other products like that, Aideen? And also, I suppose the bigger question here is, what is the overall investment community, the investment community? How are they looking at it as well? So if you have any other products, tell us. But otherwise, let's look at banks and their role in this business as well.
Yeah, I mean, so there are loads of different sort of exciting products that are coming out, like things that you would never think of, like vaccines from lactose, which are like the byproduct of cheese production. They're working on that in Bioorbic here. So products that can be, that can be socially useful as well as high value. And yeah, massive opportunities in, say, the waste wood industry, and linking with sort of new technologies like 3D printing. You can use there are waste wood cabins made from, you can use 3D printing to make cabins with the waste wool, with the waste wood, not the waste wool. So there are loads of opportunities. I think that in terms of funding, I think it's really important to talk about that. So, I mean, there was a survey done, I think it was last year, it was done at an EU level about the barriers for SMEs to getting involved in the bioeconomy. And, up there were things like policy supports and access to finance and funding for things like this. So I think, ways to address those issues. There is massive funding massive funding opportunities that Patrick would be able to talk about in more detail coming through the EU. So through their Horizon 2021 to 2027 project, I think they've allocated, I have the figures here somewhere, 10 billion to food and natural resources, and that includes the funding, that includes the bioeconomy. And then also there's the EU Green Deal call is coming out in 2020, the Government Climate Action Fund. So there's going to be lots of funding opportunities. I think that's where we come in Bioorbic and in the business school, is linking people up with these funding opportunities. So communities, potential entrepreneurs, anyone who wants to get involved, linking them up with these funding opportunities. The funding, like globally, the funding, or in different countries, the funding does tend to come from the public sector side. Bioorbic has a lot of, here in UCD, we have a lot of, we do have private sector investment, and it tends to be, working on specific projects. I think it's at such an early stage that I think the funding will come publicly, particularly through the EU, at this stage. So I think as we're starting out, public funding and then private sector investment is going to become more important, and that's very much our role, is making those links. And I would encourage people to, in the chat, or if you want to send me an email, like, we want this sort of, the creation of the networks around the bioeconomy, we want this to be a two-way sort of bi-directional communication, if you like, where what we don't, develop these networks top down. We want to figure out what people need who want to get involved in the bioeconomy, who feel there might be opportunities here, what they want us to sort of look at, and how we can use maybe existing links, existing connections to kind of integrate the bioeconomy in the best way that we can.
That's really good. That's a really good outline of the various fundings. Patrick, I suppose there's lots of farmers looking in, and they'll know that this is something they'd like to get more involved in. In terms of the Common Agricultural Policy, the current programs, etc., could you just address sort of the opportunities there?
Yeah, so I think there's some key tools in the Common Agricultural Policy that can help promote and develop the bioeconomy. So, for example, measures around knowledge transfer, training of advisors to have a better understanding of bioeconomy opportunities, and that they can inform farmers and work with them maybe on innovation projects. EIP Agri, that sort of bottom-up opportunity where you understand the problem within your local area, you understand where resources might be, you work with experts like James or Rosanna to identify technologies and to look at the business case and to look at what products and what markets are out there to develop your ideas. Leader is another key opportunity, I think, and we need to steer people to look at that. And Leader is interesting because it allows people to look at what resources might be available within that LAG area and local development committee area. So why would you try to develop a bioeconomy opportunity within the area where you're working? So it's because you want to generate better income as a primary producer, but you may need to work with a group of primary producers to have a sufficient amount of feedstock and to be able to invest in a technology, and to also then maybe have better water, have better biodiversity, have better climate action approach, and also then maybe engaging with other rural entrepreneurs that maybe are outside farming, but if you bolt on their skills with your primary production skills, then you have a new business opportunity that you haven't seen before. And that could be around, like, if we try to think through the different sectors, if we think through different parts of agriculture production, it could be in animal agriculture where it's manures and slurries. It could be in crop production systems where you're not only providing the cereal, the grain that you produce, but when the grain is processed, there may be more value in the materials that are sort of residues of the initial processing, where you can create value with that. And they should be explored. So it's going to take a little bit of initiative. And what the role of the Department of Agriculture and with other departments and agencies is to help stimulate this initiative and to support with the different CAP tools. But maybe then it's going beyond CAP, it's into other sort of infrastructure on education and skills like SkillNet or the further education system, or maybe it's even working with our colleagues in Enterprise Ireland or in Intertrade Ireland who will offer entrepreneurship programs, or working back within the universities, say on the New Frontier system, which allows you as a primary producer or a rural entrepreneur to work with people who understand technologies like James and Rosanna and even Aideen, who will help work out the business element of it. And then ultimately, I suppose, in the bigger picture, it's probably worth noting, Seamus, that at the end of this, it's not only funding, but it's finance. And like, for example, the Irish Strategic Investment Fund would be very interested in opportunities around bioeconomy. In the larger system in Europe, there is very big public-private opportunities for bioeconomy. And in the programs that are being developed from 2021 to 2027, primary producers are being picked out as being absolutely necessary parts of these research projects. So we know our farmers, we know they're very busy on a day-to-day basis, and it's sometimes very difficult to emerge and look at different ideas, but we want to try and help them and say there is funding there to help them try to be more innovative, to look at diversification opportunities, and we are going to try and de-risk that to allow them to proportionately build up to where they might want to consider ideas. So hopefully that gives a little bit of an outline of where we might be going.
And I suppose, Patrick, a quick follow-up there is, if farmers listening were interested in somewhat becoming involved but don't know a lot, would they go to Teagasc? Where would you send them in terms of just to get more information?
Yeah, I think so. Like if they were to call me in the morning, I would put them in touch with our colleagues in Teagasc, with James and his colleagues in IT Tralee, who have a specific research group, Rosanna and Aideen in the BioOrbic Research Centre in Dublin. There's also the Irish Bioeconomy Foundation that works with a range of stakeholders. There's actually, when people get a chance to put the shovel in the ground and really try and unearth what's going on here, Seamus, they'll actually see there's quite a few of us there ready and willing to talk to everybody. And I suppose that's part of why we're having this conversation with you today, is to sort of take away the element of, is this actually real? Is this actually happening? And I think that's the point, is that we are seeing really very interesting niche developments, and these niche developments are producing high value products. Like, who ever thought that our primary producers would be linked into the production of vaccines or linked into the production of materials that go into wind turbines? So we all have to sort of develop our thinking around this, and there's good resources to read, but then we need to concretely do something, and that's where the likes of EIP Agri and Leader and all these tools, they help us to do this and make the connections. Connections and networking is essential.
Seamus, can I just come in on Patrick's
James,
point, because I saw that question. I think it was from Teresa, and just on the where farmers can start to look in terms of the bioeconomy. I think there's a lot about seeing is believing. People want to see things; they don't want to read about things. Seeing things in action, and if you look at I think Aideen mentioned the Agri-Chem Way project, Glombia's project in Tipperary is an example of that. It's really, developed a lot of interest among stakeholders all over the country in the bioeconomy. Projects like that can have a big influence. And I just want to highlight, we have a new project which starts next year, which will actually, it's focused on primary production. It's going to focus on business models for primary producers to get involved in the bioeconomy. And it's going to look at international best practice, and it will involve hosting trips to different sites of international best practice. So if there are farmers or people representing farmers who are on the webinar, if they want to get in touch with us with a view to participating in some of those initiatives next year, that could be a good learning experience.
Thanks, James, for that. When we're hearing about the different uses, as Aideen pointed out, I think it's quite exciting. Rosanna, there's a question there for you from Karen Mahan. I don't know if you want to take it, on projects funded to assess the potential environmental effect of extracting the maximum value along the production chain and assessment. Do you want to take that for a second?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I saw that question come through. And then just to highlight that even part of my own project and then the group that I'm involved in, all of us are looking at life cycle assessment of installing these different technologies and the life cycle of the different products. So it's definitely a thing that we always consider is, we can't just kind of maybe throw a new technology, throw a new product out there, that we need to check the environmental credentials of everything as well. And it's not just life cycle assessment, so there's sort of different types of life cycle assessment appearing now. So traditionally it's kind of an environmental one, but now people are looking at social life cycle assessments, and then we obviously have techno-economic assessments as well. So we kind of bring all those together to make sure that the solutions we're proposing don't have any adverse effects that maybe we wouldn't have realized. So we kind of would compare maybe the business as usual with what we're proposing as kind of a new future system.
Aideen, I see another question there, but I want to sort of expand it as well. But somebody's asking, Joe Garahy, what role do you see local authorities playing in all of this? And given Rosanna's experience as well, is this something important, and can this be developed?
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to answer that question because one of the main barriers that's always identified if you're trying to develop sustainability networks, and also is identified by SMEs trying to get involved in the bioeconomy, is policy. So policy can be an enabler and a barrier. And at local level, so at national level, you need the incentives, you need to make bio-based cheaper than fossil-based. But at local level, you need the infrastructure. So this is something, I told you, Seamus, I was going to mention Italy a lot. This is something they're very good at in Italy. So I think it might have been Patrick, mentioned the municipal food waste earlier. So we, I think, have a collection rate of 10%. I think I have the figures here somewhere, of 10% of our municipal food waste. In Italy, it's up to, and bio waste, in Italy, it's up to 50%. And they did that by sort of concerted, targeted policies with local authorities. So local authorities have got a massive role to play in this. And I'm sure Patrick would probably have more to say about that. Yeah, that can be done. And they piloted that was piloted in Sligo actually a few years ago, where organic waste collection then doubled with that pilot. So that's something that can really, and local authorities can link up as networks. There's a network called Compost Plus in France, and they link where local authorities link up in terms of the municipal waste collection. So that's a huge role that that policymakers can play at local level, and obviously, national level. Incentivizing. And I wanted to, because it's related, I wanted to mention, someone mentioned the care and repair project in I think it was Roscommon. But yeah, so the kind of the sharing economy plays it. So sharing economy, I guess, is it's trying to cut down on it's trying to cut down instead of buying products to use, we say rent products, or products are shared, or services are shared. So that's something that also needs more policy support, and because there's huge, opportunities there, but also it's essential for in terms of reducing consumption. It's essential for reducing our impact, our use of natural resources, and our impact. And it's something that tends to emerge at sort of a social enterprise level, a kind of a communities and charities and groups are getting together and doing this without much policy support. There was a good paper last year. Patrick may have been involved, I'm not sure, but it was Department of Enterprise produced a good paper on opportunities in the bioeconomy and circular economy, and they talk about the sharing economy as well. So I think that's a useful resource for people. But certainly those are all the ways, I guess, in which policy can support.
And Aideen or James, any of you could take this question, but there's a student here thinking of she's doing science, biology. She hasn't a clue what she wants to do. Are the universities, are they good at promoting, or the ITs or whoever, are they good at promoting opportunities for students? Aideen, maybe you could take that first, and maybe James then.
Yeah, so I think that's something that we are going to work on in Bioorbic. So we're kind of at the moment figuring out how we can sort of develop the potential of the bioeconomy and support anyone who wants to get into this, and that includes at an education level, because there's so many new skills that need to be supported for the bioeconomy. So you have the technical skills with the new products, etc. You have the entrepreneurial and creativity, but you also have relational skills that need to be developed because of connecting people and all the network development. So there are loads of kind of education opportunities, and that's certainly something that Bioorbic will be looking, because the center is new. It was developed in 2016, so that's something that we'll be looking at in the next few years, and something certainly to work with the new Department of Higher Education on. And obviously we're funded by Science Foundation Ireland, so with them as well.
And James, in the ITs, obviously Tralee are taking a leading role here. What's your advice to that student?
Well, just to highlight that in January of this year, we launched alongside UCD and Teagasc, Ireland's first postgraduate diploma in bioeconomy with business. So it's the first higher education degree, if you like, in the bioeconomy space. It's called Bioeconomy with Business. It's been run through the Springboard initiative, Seamus, and we're currently accepting applicants for the autumn semester for start in September. And like Aideen has mentioned, there's a technical focus. So we're looking at bio-based products, biorefineries, feedstocks. We're also looking at sustainability modules like life cycle assessment. We're looking at some business and innovation modules and some policy modules as well. So something like that, I think, could be of interest to some of the listeners as well.
Thank you for that. Patrick, I suppose Tom Lavin is asking, are there examples of small farmers, smallholders involved in any projects do you know of? Just a very specific question. Can you take that? And again, I suppose we're looking at are the Teagascs of this world and everybody in this world, are they gearing up to involving more people in this area?
Absolutely, Seamus. I mean, the main one that we point to at present is the project that James has described this morning. I mean, grass is one of our major production systems, and we are examining where primary producers using technology, working with their cooperatives and Carberry, are looking at how you can develop more products from grass whilst still feeding the animal, but reducing the emissions that are coming from the animal, both to air and water, and having products that potentially can displace feed that will be imported into the country that might be needed in the pig and poultry areas, and then also potentially human nutrition products in the future. So this is an example. We know of, for example, companies that are working with seaweed harvesters, and they are producing multiple products that are going into the human and animal nutrition systems. They're producing cosmetics, they're producing products that are used for skin care and hair care. And this is linking back to where the potential for the seaweed harvester to have an improved financial position from the stock they are feeding into this company. We are also, I suppose, going to see in the very near future some emerging scientific developments where we're going to further look at opportunities on proteins across the Irish agri system, and also in terms of forestry where we can better develop. And I think we have a couple of key examples, but we have a good bit of road to travel on this, Seamus. But I think whilst this may be seen as a bit of a barrier, I would like to present it to everyone that's listening to us today as the opportunity, because imagine if the system was really well developed and then we were asking, where's the opportunity for primary producers, but everything was set up. Whereas now what we're doing is we're trying to develop the ideas, and we're including the primary producer at the start and the design of the ideas. So they have the real opportunity to get a strong foothold in the economic and the social and the environmental outcomes that may come from this. And I think that's important. So they're included right from the start. And that's the message we're trying to get across to everybody. Okay, it's going to take a little bit of reading in on this, and we're going to have to understand what the potential possibilities are, and with the likes of Aideen, Rosanna and James, understand like what's the real business opportunity and what's the cost versus the benefits, and am I willing to maybe risk and innovate and engage, or do I just want to do what I'm doing, and that's fine. But what we will see, and we have it's the history of innovation systems, is that people will emerge in this and they'll take up the opportunity, and they won't necessarily always be a young farmer, because entrepreneurship is right across the ages. It's not as a preserve of just people starting out in business. So I think it's watch this space, and our role is to speak and talk with people and facilitate and offer competitive funding opportunities and supports to allow people to develop and work within this system. But the opportunity is to be the pioneers and the early navigators and the key beneficiaries.
Rosanna, I'm very interested in the other project, Efficient Food, which is funded by the EPA, and it talks about mapping food losses. Could you just elaborate on that for me in terms of the bioeconomy?
Yes, so that's just a new project that we launched at the end of March this year. So we just recruited somebody now to come onto the project as well with our project partner. So the aim of the project then is to map from primary food production where the food losses are happening. So my colleague on that, she's been talking to food producers across the entire value chain to find out, like, actually on the road, what happens, why are all these food losses happening. So an example she gave the other day was that about 10% of mushrooms are going to waste because supermarkets want the stocks cut shorter for aesthetic reasons. So then we'll kind of follow on and say, well, what are the policy reasons behind this? How can we reduce this loss? Maybe we could, kind of find other avenues for this waste. So, there is a lot of ways you can use the kind of mushroom waste. So it's really identifying that, mapping it, and again, finding solutions for it, be they technology or policy solutions, maybe just social solutions that maybe people shouldn't care what their mushroom looks like all that much. Yes.
I like the aesthetic, but like in terms of food losses, I suppose, are you looking at it almost, some would say, oh, that's terrible, the morality of wasting food in a world where food can be scarce in some areas is a very, very, very poor reflection on us? Or are you thinking in terms of using waste food in a way that maybe it can be converted into something else? Is there an angle, or where are you going with some ideas on this?
To be honest, I think it would be both. So kind of how can we use the waste? But initially, it's always like, how can you reduce the waste in the first place? How can we maybe not see this waste at all? And then, okay, if the waste really has to happen, what can we do with it then? So it's kind of just policy interventions and, kind of social interventions as well. So really, yeah, it is both we'd be looking at, especially now. I have seen a lot of reports around this pandemic that food production could be down. We're not maybe getting access to as much food, or it just can't be grown or harvested as efficiently as maybe it could have been before. So I think it's always important, though, to make sure that we know the reasons for food loss and how we can reduce it right at the very start. And then maybe if we can't stop it arising, what can we do with it then?
And just before I move on to Aileen, because I want to link this question, but a lot of the information you're talking about is on www.abceconomy. I take that. Where did ABC come out of it? Just as a question here, does it mean anything other than the basics, or what does it stand for?
Well, it actually stands for Agri-Bio-Circular Economy.
There you are.
ABC Economy. So obviously then the whole concept of what we're doing is how can you create a circular economy from the waste, but obviously ABC Economy is a bit more catchy.
It sure is, and I'm learning all the time. But it's a good website to go on. So I would advise people to go on it. I mean, again, I suppose, Aileen, we're back to the ABC of the economy, or as some other famous person said, it was the economy stupid. Is there any figures around the value of bio in terms of the overall economy? I know I said to you before the program started this morning, the old adage, you're a person, and I'm talking about me now, I'm a person of great potential and I always will be. So is bioeconomy potential, but will it move from the Cinderella on to a wider, and when do you see that happening?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So already the bioeconomy is worth, so in the Eurozone, it's worth 2.3 trillion euros.
Yes.
These are 2016 figures, and it employs 18.6 million people. So yeah, so already the bioeconomy it's very valuable for the economy. In terms of potential, we were talking about this earlier. So we're at the early stages. There are loads of opportunities. I think it's really important to acknowledge the risks, and this is something that I talked about a little bit in a reply to a question on the chat there. So this can't be a business as usual approach to developing this brand new, very exciting sector. So this has to be regenerative, and it has to be authentic. And what I mean by that is, so the regenerative, it has to be circular. It can't just be using more resources and creating more waste. It has to be maximizing the value of the resources in a sustainable way. And that's part of the cascade model that Rosanna was talking about. That's really important for that. And recognizing, taking into account the full value of nature. So this is something that, we didn't do with the peat in the past, but I know that Bord na Móna are starting to do this now with the peat. They're using a natural capital accounting approach. And this is something that our colleagues in Bioorbic, who are part of Trinity, are working on, natural capital accounting, to make sure that we take into account that nature is not just it's not just something that has an economic value. It brings lots of other benefits to humans, and we're also dependent on it very much so as well. So that's something that we on the sustainability platform in Bioorbic really need to take into account. And the authenticity is also very important. So this can't be greenwashing. This has to be truly authentic. And this has been a big problem for the early sort of bioeconomy, when it was biofuels, and it was a case of burning the feedstocks that were being used were crops that should have been used for food production. And even now you have, big biomass power plants in the UK. You've got the Drax plant where they're burning wood pellets, that are sourced from Brazil. So it has to be circular, authentic. We can't, we have to be transparent and honest about where the resources are coming from. And we have to sort of develop the economy in this new sort of way. And I think in terms of like the work that Patrick does in the Department of Agriculture, working with across departments, I think that's really important for developing the bioeconomy. And the fact that in Bioorbic we have us social scientists to sort of support the scientists and ensure that we take these issues into account. I think we're on the right track in terms of developing the bioeconomy.
That's really interesting. I think some of the figures you quoted there are astronomical, and maybe it's not as Cinderella an economy as sometimes some of us think. I mean, Patrick, you've already said that you will encourage as many farmers. I know Bridget Murphy has a question there about primary producers being in at the beginning, and you're saying you want to encourage as many farmers to have an interest in this. And given that James, I think, said an acre of grass could be upgraded to 10 times the value, that's something really to think about. Are you hopeful, Patrick, that the Rural Development Programme coming up, I know there's details of it coming, will begin to address this in a much more profound way than we've had in the past?
Well, that's part of the work that's ongoing. Like I don't think I'd be in a position to oversell what's going to be in there, but I suppose from the national bioeconomy policy development, we are making our case to, for example, the development of the CAP strategic plan, to in the future development of the forestry state aid program, to the development of the maritime and fisheries fund that will come. So basically for farmers, people working in fisheries and foresters, that there will be opportunities for the example of knowledge transfer, advisory services, and the likes of cooperation projects or leader, that the funding, the bioeconomy will be in scope for those funding. We will be dependent on people, I suppose, picking up the ball at that point and looking at the opportunities. But what we're trying to do is put in place the likes of the research centres that are open for business to speak to all the people along the agri-food value chain, from primary production to processing, right through to the waste system. And so I suppose what we're trying to say is we're open for business. And now there's very interesting, I think, Seamus, one of the things that might be useful for people as a background, the Irish Bioeconomy Foundation, which is an innovation cluster and a group funded by Enterprise Ireland to put in place a sort of a pilot biorefinery facility. And that's coming down the line now with planning permission being put in place, has done an Irish biomap where they have, I'm just reading my notes here, they have looked at all the different sectors that are relevant to the bioeconomy. They've looked at the different feedstocks, and by that I mean biological resources that are relevant. They've looked at where all these resources are within different provinces. James is very heavily involved in this type of work, and they've looked at examination of the types of business models. So our job is to kind of put this information into this in play, that people can look and discuss and talk amongst themselves, and then come talk to us, come talk to James, Rosanna, Aideen, and all their colleagues. And work with industry. So it's going to take a bit of working out, but if people have the background information like this, then they're better able to understand it and be able to make their case and develop their ideas. And when you start applying this to the technologies that's developing, which is separating out biomass that's being produced through agriculture, fisheries, forestry, and converting it into not only food and feed, but products that are going beyond into different industries. Like, for example, in Germany, one of the big cases they make is they're turning dandelions into car tires. So, and we know colleagues in the University of Limerick who are talking to the likes of Fiat and Airbus for the use of forestry materials to be going into these sort of advanced uses. Yeah. You start thinking Ireland needs to strategically think about where we can take advantage of this. And so let's see, Seamus, let's have these conversations.
Indeed. And Rosanna, we're on the final round here. If you were sort of in Martin Hayden, the new minister, junior minister in charge of this kind of research, what would you be saying to him?
Gosh,
quick sentence.
Yeah. Well, I think I have to say that, there are a lot of people like myself, Aideen and James in universities working on this problem, but we are all linked up so that if people don't know where to go, then they can just email any of us and we'll know, we can direct you to other people. And then maybe to not forget that we do want to be heavily involved with industry. You can tell that all of our work is involved with industry, even though we're in an academic setting. We want to be involved with industry. So I think that's kind of always at the forefront of what we do. Like, can we make sure this is actually real? You can talk about the Cinderella part, but actually we do want to make sure everything is really realistic for Ireland industries.
Absolutely. James, what would you say to him?
I think that we're all working towards a low carbon economy, but we also want a low carbon economy that's competitive. And I think that the bioeconomy and the element of cascading that we're referring to will add a lot more value. It may put us in a position that we're not entirely dependent on subsidies to get towards a low carbon economy by 2050. We have a limited amount of bioresources, natural resources, and we have to think about how we can use that most effectively. We have a big pharmaceutical sector, a big medical device sector, big agri-food sector, but we import huge amounts of energy, about 6 billion per year, chemicals about 4 billion, fertilizers about 500 million, protein about 1 billion, plastics about 1 billion. We can offset a lot of those if we learn to use our natural resources, and that can have a lot of sustainability benefits and a lot of socioeconomic benefits.
That should be a really good incentive to do something. Aideen, would you have any advice for the new minister?
So we need to make this transition to a low carbon economy rapidly, and we need to do it in a way that supports people and communities and values nature, is within planetary boundaries, and that needs to be at the center, I think, of any policy, to stop thinking of the economy as an isolated thing, and to remember that we are dependent on nature and we are dependent on people and communities. And to engage more, people need to engage, or policy needs to engage more with people and communities and let them lead this transition, figure out what they need and lead this transition.
Final word to you, Patrick. You've really come across, as indeed all of you this morning, as really enthusiastic promoters of bioeconomy. What would you say to the minister? I'm sure you might meet him on the odd occasion in the corridors, and you wouldn't dare suggest any advice, I'm sure, but in a whispering sense, what do you want to see happen next?
So I suppose, Seamus, what is being proposed to all EU member states is that they look to deploy the bioeconomy at the local level, and that they examine key opportunities for primary producers and industries across agriculture, food and marine. And I think very good example projects where we put all the actors together based on the rural and regional resources, and we work with the key scientists to look at what key products could be produced, and we work with our enterprise and our development agencies such as Board B and Enterprise Ireland, and we know what the world is looking for, and Ireland addresses either the demand, as James was saying, to address materials that we spend money on bringing into the country, or what the world globally is looking for. And Ireland has been very good at doing this across all sectors, and I think I would be probably promoting the opportunity as a new dimension for the Irish agri-food sector to examine.
Thank you very much. I think this has been a fascinating discussion, and certainly opens up the imaginations and the thinking, I hope, of many, many people who have joined in. So my thanks to Dr. Rosanna Kleeman, and please go to the website ABC Economy. I think you'll find lots of information. My thanks to Dr. Aideen O'Doherty, UCD, and again, I'd say log into the UCD website as well. They are certainly doing an enormous amount of work, as is James Gaffey, Project Coordinator in Tralee IT. Thank you for being here this morning. And of course, Patrick Barrett, who, in my opinion, and he can be modest as if he wishes, but he is really an energetic and passionate promoter of bioeconomy, as I know through his writings and through his work in the Department of Agriculture. To all of you, thank you so much for being here this morning. To those of you who joined us, I thank you especially for the questions. I hope they were all answered. Next week it'll be the last of the innovation series. We're talking about food, and already we will be talking things about snails and all sorts of exotic food production. So I think you'll find it very interesting. So until we see you next week, thank you for joining. And as I keep saying to you, if you've never heard of Irish Rural Link, go on the website and maybe join up. Thank you very much and good morning.